I'm Ricky Sherwood.
And I'm Dave Adams.
And welcome to the Core Mechanic.
Today we are looking at number 14 on Mike Selinker's list of 100 games you must absolutely positively know how to play. Cluedo. Cluedo. Not Clue. Cluedo.
Or
Sorry,
Clue
I got
if
carried
you're
away
in
there.
North America.
Cluedo, or Clue to our North American friends, was designed by Anthony E Pratt and published by Parker Brothers in 1949. Since then, it's amassed an immense franchise, including books, magazines, a play, a musical, a TV show, one of my favourite Tim Curry films, not to mention any number of republishings, rethemings, reskinnings. The game plays between 3 to 6 players in about 45 minutes. What is it with North Americans needing to change the names of things?
What? Maybe they just have an aversion to the word Ludo.
Well, it's clever though, isn't it? You've got Clue, as in mystery, question mark, whatever, and Ludo, I play. It's Latin, I play. I mean, like, where we get the word ludology from,
yep.
Or ludacious, or ludolicious.
Sure. Well, no matter that aside, this game has been around for a very long time, going on 40, no more. Jeez.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember playing it a lot as a kid, and it was my preferred game to Monopoly. Absolutely.
Because this is the generation we're talking about. There was a time where your games consisted of things like Clue, Monopoly, chess, Ludo, backgammon.
For me, chess not so much. We had a chessboard. I love chess. My brothers played chess. But their way of introducing me to the game was very occasionally, on rare occasions, they would sit down and play. It's only because I'd harp and harp and harp, and then they would just smash me and I'd have no idea what the hell just happened.
Right.
So that was my experience of, But Clue I could get into.
Yeah. What's interesting about Clue is how far apart it goes from traditional board game mechanics. You don't have little tokens moving around the board. You basically have an open house, and the only thing you have to work with is information.
You do have tokens moving around the board.
I mean, like Monopoly.
But you're right. Like, it's not a set state of play. Like, it's not like Snakes and Ladders where you are walking up a path.
Yeah.
You have free reign. It's almost like the first sandbox adventure.
Go wherever you want, and the only thing you're trying to do is deduce. That's right.
And it's right there that I think, for me, the game went from being one of my favourite games to being disinterested in it, simply because I think it fits into that solved category for me. So, you've got noughts and crosses, which for young minds, for kids, is not solved.
I've played so many games with noughts and crosses.
Well, that's right. And they love it because there's always that challenge and that element of the unknown. But at a certain point when you get old enough, you know it. You can solve it. And the only way that you would ever lose at it is
by misplaying.
So for me, there was a real element of, well, I got to a point where I just had my strategy and I would just follow it through. So Clue stopped being a very interesting game for me.
Yeah. But at its time, it was something utterly unique. And without Clue, I don't think you'd have games like Love Letter, Coup.
No. In fact, there's one big game we can credit to Clue, which I don't know that you've considered.
Mysterium?
No, possibly Mysterium, but Pandemic Legacy.
Ah, yes.
Rob Davio came up with the idea of the legacy system while he was the head of R&D at Hasbro, and was in a meeting with Clue, which they call Clue over there, and actually pitched the original legacy idea to be a Clue game. He was sitting in the meeting wondering why
do people keep coming back to this house with murderers?
Yeah, why do the guests keep coming back? And so it's that whole element of that it led down the path of this changing game state.
Yeah.
And perhaps it was one of the first games to really have that changing game where you have the same setup, but you really don't know what the end game is. Like, you know someone's murdered someone
in a room with something.
Yeah. So
it's your job. Yeah.
You have to find out who. And you've always got the same materials, and the same board, and the same setup. But it's up to you to use your logical reasoning and deduction to find out who the criminal was.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that about it. For me, it just became a little bit too easy to solve. So it just became a race.
Yeah.
If others had a strategy, It was just who could get there first. So I'd just go into a room that I had. I would choose either a person or an item that I had and make sure that one of the things in my accusation I didn't have. And I would just go through each item until I stopped getting until I could not find anything from anyone.
My dirty little secret, I can probably count the number of times I've played Clue on a single hand. It was not a big part of me during my childhood, and the last time I played it, I was actually a bit blown away that this was something that children were playing, because I struggled a little bit. I was still trying to get my head around the rules and what you were trying to do. I didn't really realize what the pad was for until a bit later on. Yeah. I thought it was some sort of scoring sheet. But no, once again, a completely different game that works on something beyond simple mechanics. It's intellectual. It
is. And I think it brought you as a player in where it took away that whole luck element. It wasn't really luck based.
No dice.
So no dice. Monopoly. Well, there's a dice to move only, but it's just for movement.
Yeah.
So the only luck element is how far can you move in a game, and it's gotten to a point now where people have even worked out which the best player is to have based on where their starting position is, based on how close they are to the first doors.
Yep.
So I think there's two main characters which are the best to have on that basis, because you can get into a room quicker. But then again, like, you could roll 3 1s and move only one space.
As I'm sure you have.
Which I have done before, thank you very much. Yeah. But taking that's not a huge impact on the game. That doesn't necessarily determine the winner.
Yeah.
It may influence a little bit, but it's not a determining factor. The determining factor is how well you can process and deduce and find out what's going on. So I think that is a new element. I think it was revolutionary. And I think I can understand why it's embedded itself as such an important game for young people to play. Because it really puts people into a scenario that they enjoy. Oh, we're solving a murder. That's something we like. We love investigating. We love being a good guy looking for a culprit. And so you sort of tap into that whole cops and robbers sort of gameplay. And then you've got that mystery. And then it's up to you to be a detective and to work it out. I think that's wonderful gameplay. I think it's just wonderful. Like, for a young mind, that's exciting.
How do you think it stands up today? If you have to introduce a deduction sort of game to your child right now, not right now, but
she's two and a half.
When she's older, is Clue going to be the first game you put her in front of?
It may not. If it's not the first, it'll be one of the first. And I've thought about this because, even those games I'm not hugely fond of right now. And it's only because I'm a much older gamer, I've got much more experience, so it doesn't challenge me as much. But again, I've got to remember that this is a developing mind. So yes, I would suggest definitely making this one of the games that she plays.
And I suppose one of the big things is, as you mentioned before, since Cluedo is essentially a solved game, it is a game that young people can master and then move on to somewhat more advanced fare.
Yeah, and going back to, I think you used gateway games in a previous episode to talk about games that not only help non-gamers to get into games, but help in the development from one style of game to another. So it introduces them to more complexity. And I like that about Cluedo. But I also think that, a lot of games, a lot of social deduction games have really come out of this whole genre that Cluedo really made happen, I think. And they're more clever today for sure. Like, I love Coup as an introductory game for a lot of kids. Simply because it's a social deduction game. It requires more bluffing though, but it's harder to find those games that really rely on you using those mathematical skills of logical deduction. I mean, I'm struggling to think of any good examples right now that do that.
The game I played
the
game I played most recently, which pretty much works in the same room, weapon, and person thing, was Mysterium. But that moved away from pure deduction into an almost abstract sort of mind-reading communication.
The focus is on
thing.
communication there, isn't it?
You've got to understand how the other player's thinking to try and make the most out of Ghost's clues, which is fun, but it's nowhere near as concrete as Clue would be.
Yeah, I suppose Werewolf, for me, would fit a little bit more into the deduction side of things, simply because, you've got that social element to the game where people are bluffing and some people are lying. You've got to work out who, but I think it does require you to be very clever with picking up clues and picking up on what's happening in the group as much as anything. I'd say there's some really clear puzzly games which use deduction very well. Few that probably use deduction like this more in the board game scene. I think more modern games tend to focus on that social element.
Yeah, which is ideally what tabletop gaming is about.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting was that some of the older rules, I almost wonder, would it be good to play with those rules? Some of the older rules included that you had to move into a room with a player to be able to accuse them. I can see how that would slow it down, but there would be some advantage to, if you knew who the murderer was, then you would have to try and hunt that person down, which might key others into what's going on.
Yeah.
The problem is then if you are the murderer, of course, then you've got the piece, so you can make the accusation. So your trouble would be getting into the right room to make the accusation. So I wonder if there are ways to play with the rules. I liked the idea, one of the old rules that didn't make it in was you actually had to go into a room to reveal cards. So you didn't actually, no one had all the cards. People didn't have the cards in front of them. You went into a room and the card would be revealed that was in there. So you would go into a room and discover, oh, the wrench is here. And I'd mark that down. So you had to explore as well. Yeah.
So as upcoming game designers, what can we learn from this?
Well, I think there's a lot to do in terms of how different mechanics rely on each other. I like that this game has a similar setup every game, but then at the end of the game is always an unknown element.
Yeah.
So you're working to, you know what you're working towards. You know you've got to find out these three things. Even though it's a little bit limited in how it goes about that, it's a different endpoint every time. You've got however many weapons cards, however many players, however many rooms, and so there's quite a lot to actually unfold and try and work out and work your way through. So I think that's a really good thing. Thinking about games that can have that end game change constantly, I think that's a real challenging element of game design.
Yeah, and I think that Clue is probably the first example of the fact that multiplayer tabletop games do not have to rely on luck. They don't have to rely on dice rolls.
Absolutely. Really being thinking and heady sort of games. I like that about it. That there's still that unknown element.
Yep.
But to make it a known element, it really relies on you as a player. So I think that it's really clear why this game is on Mike's list. I think it really did set the genre of using deduction, using known information, working out that unknown information, going through a process of elimination. Very good elements, very good math skills, very good social skills, good English skills. Really clever game, and
the grandfather of all logical deduction games.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I think it's going to lead really well into games like Zendo and other sort of deduction or induction, as the case may be for that one. Look, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for watching. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below what your favourite deduction game is. Until next time, my name's Dave Adams.
And I'm Ricky Sherwood.
And you've been watching The Core Mechanic.
Clue.